of the liminal and the weird, and welcome to another video by Liminal Spaces. I have finally done it. I have completed the first set, I guess you could say, the Book of the New Sun, which are these 4 books right here. I just finished this one yesterday, The Castle of the Autarch. This has been a 1.5 year long process that I have completely enjoyed. I hadn't ever heard of these. I didn't come across these when I was growing up or a teenager. The first time I heard about these books was when I started watching Moid's channel, Media Death Cult. That's the first time he put Shadow the Torture, I think, #1 on his list of best science fiction novels. And I started hearing about the series a lot from there. And then Virgil from Literally Books is a huge fan of this series. And he jumped in with me when I started reading these and wanted to do a reread. I think it's his 3rd or 4th reread of these books. And I am going to review this as if it's one book, these 4 books, because honestly, it is one book. These are 4 volumes that make up the Book of the New Sun. So each one of these is a quarter of one book. So I'll be talking about the Book of the New Sun in general. So this is the story of a man named Severian, who we start with as a young child in this book, and he is part of the Torturers Guild, which is a guild of people that straight up work for the government and torture people for the government. This, of course, makes it sound like a very gory book right off the bat, and it's really not. There's very little torture in this book all the way around it. Most of it is Severian's journey after he leaves the Torturers Guild. So, there's not a lot of torture that goes on in this book. But anyway, he eventually goes against his guild's tradition by having sympathy and trying to allow one of his clients, one of the guild's clients, he sneaks her in a knife in order for her to end her life so that she doesn't have to undergo torture anymore, and is kind of expelled from the guild, and he is sent out into the world. He's still a torturer, and he's sent to a place called Thrax, where he's going to become the Lictor, which is kind of this policeman for this town. I know that sounds strange, but one of the things you'll find with this book is Wolfe uses a lot of words that are archaic in origin in order to show that this is written in a time that is not our own. And it's his journey as he wanders through the cities and eventually countries of Urth, Urth. Which brings us to kind of the main idea of this series and what I loved about it the most. This will fall under the category of the Dying Earth trope. This takes place on Urth, and the sun is dying. So it's the kind of last struggling centuries of the planet Earth. And so as you read this, and this is something that I feel is really true with most Dying Earth that I read, you have to be really careful how you imagine the settings. I have what I kind of consider like a baseline when I read fantasy for what things look like in my head, how I imagine them in my head. And that's not something you can do with this book. For instance, they talk about mounts. I think kestrels is one of the things they call a mount, if I'm correct. And they're described like horses, but you can't imagine it as a horse. It's not a horse. It is some kind of, I think the Autarch one has one here. It's got 3 toes on each foot like a lizard. Yeah, you have to, and you can't just imagine everything as technologically like it is now in a post-apocalyptic setting, because that doesn't work either, because this takes place, millions of years from our current time when he wrote this. So cities have risen and fallen and risen and fallen, and they have technology that is far superior to anything that we have now. So you have this world where you have to imagine everything kind of scientifically futuristic, but at the same time post-apocalyptic and broken down. It's really fun. That's for me where a large chunk of the fun of this novel is. Of course, Gene Wolfe himself has said that he is truly inspired by Jack Vance's The Dying Urth. This is the first edition of Jack Vance's The Dying Urth, released in 1950. It's not the first time the concept of a dying Urth was created. I think that's Clark Ashton Smith that first came up with that idea. And it may even be earlier than that. I'm not sure. But this is where it was really, truly solidified. And somebody recently commented on the channel and said, Gene Wolfe said in an interview that straight up, this series is set in this exact same universe. I haven't been able to find that interview to verify it, so take that with a grain of salt, but it makes sense. It makes sense because this, in my opinion, is a smaller version of this. And of course, there's 3 other books in this series. I've only read this first one, and this first one is incredible. I absolutely recommend it very highly, but I feel like Gene Wolfe kind of took off where Jack Vance left off, and it really, really worked out really wonderfully. Okay, should you read this? Yes, you absolutely should read this. However, this is a hard series to recommend because the first book is very beautifully written, really fantastical, and also kind of frustrating, especially your first time through. And if you want to see an example of that, you can go back to the video I made when I had just read this first one. I think it's called Looking for the Keys to Unlock Gene Wolfe's Shadow of the Torture, I think is the name of the video, where I talk about the fact that we are given these hallucinatory visions and landscapes that are beautiful and weird, but straight up make no sense. And as much as I love weird on this channel, I have kind of a strong rule that I don't want to find stuff that is just weird for the sake of being weird, that has no reason or purpose, especially books that have strange things occurring throughout without giving us any clues or ability to solve these riddles and why they're occurring. I hope that makes sense. But in this case, it's very difficult to judge this story on this first book. I could easily say this first book doesn't give you the keys to unlock any of the weird stuff that's going on at all. But that would be like me picking up a novel, reading 1/4 of it, and saying, this doesn't make any damn sense, and throwing it down. The concept that this is split into 4 books is only because of its length. These are not, in my opinion, I mean, and they do follow ebbs and flows, but I don't think he thought of these as 4 distinctly different things. I think he kept writing the same story. So this is 1/4 of the story, this is 1/4 of the story, and so on. And when you look at it that way, then, in my opinion, this book is freaking brilliant. I enjoyed it so much. All the keys to unlock this are there. It's all there. Every bit of it is there. And it is so enjoyable to discover them, because for the first part of the story, you are lulled into these beautiful visions that make no sense, but you can just experience them. And if you're able to let the frustration go as you read through the story, all of those things will be solved. And by the time you get here, you're thinking back all the way to here and going, oh, that's what that was. Oh, that's what that was. Which is why many people say that you don't really experience the Book of the New Sun until your first reread. And I will admit, when I first heard that, I was like, Jesus, that's asking. I mean, not only is this long as hell and a big ask from the very beginning, but then to say you have to read the whole thing all the way through and then read it again, that is asking so much. But by the time I was here, And here, I was really looking forward to popping this open again, because then you can read it from a new perspective, right? He trains us for the strangeness of this world he's trying to present in these 2 volumes. And then in these 2 volumes, he gives us the keys to understand this new world he's trying to present us with, so that when we go back here, we'll have the keys to be able to completely understand this new world that he's trying to present. Honestly, I really loved it. I really did. And I am looking forward to my reread. I really am. But I also understand people that have given up. I think Bookpilled read this first one and was like, there's nothing there. It's weirdness for its own sake. And he stopped at that point. And I get it, because this is a weird, like I said, a hard ask. And Gene Wolfe, the way that I described it on one of the deep dives we did with Virgil, is that Gene Wolfe doesn't break you easily into this story and carry you along the way. Gene Wolfe runs up, hits you on the back of the head, knocks you unconscious, throws you in the trunk of his car, and forces you through this story until you are able to finally understand what's going on somewhere around here. And I'm shocked at how well this is done, because it means people read this first book and kept going, which is wonderful, because I think this is a point where a lot of people are going to go, oh no, I can't take that. That is just weirdness. But the people that did read it started getting that payoff, and the payoff was wonderful. These are very hard to discuss. I think I'm going to leave that aspect of it here. Yes, I recommend that you read these. Yes, I recommend that you read the 500 pages of hallucinatory madness in order to get to these 2 books that are, in my opinion, incredibly straightforward. I feel like these 2 books are absolute insanity, and these 2 books are absolutely straightforward fantasy epics, science fantasy epics, that allow you to come back here and read these as straightforward science fantasy epics. It's really crazy, but yeah, you have to trust me for 500 pages, and that's a hard thing to do as a reviewer, to say trust me for 500 pages, let alone the author of a book to say trust me for 500 pages and have people put up with that. But that's what makes it so unique, in my opinion. That's what makes this stick out so much from the other fantasy that was coming out at the time. That's the brilliance of this. And I think that brilliance goes all the way back to 1950, because I think that's very similar with Jack Vance. The first couple of stories, you're like, what the hell's going on? Because he's just throwing you into this world that is, millions of years into the future. And just this is this weird mix of magic and science. And you don't know what's science, and you don't know what's magic. You don't know what is tradition. You don't know, how many apocalypses the Earth has gone through in that time. Absolutely wild. So, yes, you should read this. This is wonderful. In fact, if you do read it, you'll probably want to read it twice. I do. I know a reread's coming to this in the future, and I know I'm going to look at these stories completely differently when I do reread them, and it's going to be a riot. I'm very much looking forward to it. I don't want to get into the plot any more than that. However, if you are interested, for every one of these quarters of the book, I have made a video and eventually done a deep dive with Virgil. I don't know if we did on the first one, but we definitely started on the second one. So there's hours on this channel of me talking about each one of these. And Virgil and I are going to do a deep reading of this one coming up. So you can expect that in the next couple of weeks. We'll do a deep reading of that as well. I do understand this is the first volume, Book of the New Sun. Then he did a sequel called Urth of the New Sun, which I absolutely will read. And then we have this, which is really unique. This is called The Castle of the Otter, and it comes from a mistake one of the advertisers made of the Citadel of the Autarch. They tried to just write what it was from memory, I guess. The story is in this book, and they ended up messing up the title. Instead of the Citadel of the Autarch, they wrote the Castle of the Otter, and he loved that so much that he decided he had to make a book of it. And this is a short book that is essays about the writing of this book. There's definitions of terms. It looks really interesting, and I'm going to read it. And this came out in 1982. This came out in 80. This came out in 81. This came out in 82. This came out in 83. So this came out between these two, and it looks absolutely incredible. I'm sure I'll learn a lot reading through that. A lot of you might be thinking, hey, you should just jump right to the Urth of the New Sun, read that sequel. It's kind of a coda for this book, they say. But this didn't come out until 87. And I would like to sit for a little while and ponder the story as the people in 83 who finished this had to take it, right? Without the Urth of the New Sun. They didn't have that choice from 83 to 87. They just had to look at this as it was with these 4 books. So I want to sit on that for a while. I'm going to read this next just to get more of an idea. I want to read this before Virgil and I talk about it. And then probably in about 6 months, I'll finish it up with Urth of the New Sun, and then I will have read everything, including what inspired it. So if you haven't read this, I highly recommend it. It's weird. It's the kind of stuff that I love pushing on this channel. It's very strange. And the first 2 books are the longest ask from an author to just go with the flow, to just enjoy everything washing over you. But the keys that are eventually given really make that worth it. I would love to see somebody try to take this on as a series, a TV series, somebody that has enough of a budget to really do this justice, because I think it could be absolutely incredible. I really do. Okay, that's all I have for that. Thank you very much for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.